Envy does not begin with hostility. It begins with attention. You look outward, you measure, you compare. Someone advances faster, possesses more, receives recognition you did not. Your mind draws a line, ahead of you, behind you. That line alters your inner state. Comparison feels reasonable. It feels informative, but its effect is corrosive. The moment you compare yourself to another person, your internal reference point dissolves. Value stops being self-defined. It becomes relative. This is why envy feels destabilizing. Not because you want what they have, but because your position feels reduced. Envy is not desire for possessions. It is resistance to hierarchy. Another person's progress becomes a verdict. Another person's success becomes a judgment. Your mind stops asking, "Is my direction correct?" It starts asking, "Why am I behind?" That question is destructive because it assumes a shared race, a shared timeline, a shared standard. None of these are real. Comparison narrows perception. You stop seeing your own structure. You fixate on another person's outcome. Distortion follows. You exaggerate their advantage. You diminish your own position. You ignore unseen costs. The mind fills missing information with fantasy. Their life appears cleaner, easier, more complete. Envy feeds on partial views. Once it takes hold, behavior changes. Motivation becomes brittle. Discipline weakens. Focus fractures. You stop building. You start monitoring. This is the quiet damage of comparison. It redirects attention away from control. If envy repeatedly disrupts your peace, it is not because others are ahead. It is because you accepted a comparison that was never valid. In the next phase, we will examine how comparison replaces judgment and why envy dissolves when authority is restored inward. Comparison does not simply notice difference. It installs a false standard. The mind accepts a quiet premise that another person's outcome is relevant to your direction. Once this premise is accepted, judgment bends. Instead of asking, "Is my action correct?" the mind asks, "Where do I rank?" This is the corruption. Comparison converts life into hierarchy: ahead, behind, winning, losing. But hierarchy requires a shared metric, and life does not provide one. Different capacities, different constraints, different starting points, different costs, different aims. Comparison ignores all of this. It compresses complex paths into visible results. What you see is surface. What you compare is outcome. What you miss is structure. This is why judgment degrades. Conclusions are evaluated without context. Then a second distortion appears. Speed is mistaken for superiority. Faster seems better. More visible seems higher. Recognition seems deserved. From this error, envy forms, not because you want their life, but because your mind mislabels position. Comparison trains the mind to outsource evaluation. Worth is no longer measured by alignment, it is measured by placement. Once this happens, discipline weakens. Why continue patiently if others appear ahead? Why tolerate effort if others appear rewarded? These questions poison focus. They are built on a corrupted metric. The Stoics understood this clearly. When judgment depends on externals, stability disappears, because externals never stop moving. As long as comparison remains active, clarity cannot hold. In the next phase, we will dismantle the comparison metric itself and show how envy collapses once judgment returns to what you actually control. Envy dissolves when the metric disappears. Comparison survives only if you accept that another person's outcome has authority over your evaluation. Remove that authority, and envy loses its foundation. The Stoic shift is exact. You stop measuring position. You measure alignment, not where you stand relative to others, but whether your actions match your standard. This restores judgment. Another person's success no longer implies your deficiency. Another person's speed no longer implies your delay, because their path is not your reference. When judgment returns inward, comparison weakens automatically. You stop asking, "How do I compare?" You ask, "Am I acting correctly?" That question returns control. Envy requires hierarchy. Hierarchy collapses without a shared metric. This is why Stoics rejected comparison, not as virtue signaling, as clarity. What you do not control cannot define you. When attention remains on what you govern, other people's outcomes lose weight. Their success becomes information, not a verdict, not a threat. This does not produce indifference, it produces accuracy. You see clearly what belongs to you and what does not. Once this distinction is stable, envy has nowhere to attach. In the next phase, we will apply this internal metric in real situations and show how to remain steady even when surrounded by visible success or advantage. Comparison returns in precise moments. You see an announcement, you hear an achievement, you notice recognition that is not yours. Envy enters quietly, as contraction, not hostility. Application begins with interruption. At the instant comparison appears, shift evaluation, not toward the other person, back to your standard. Ask nothing about their position. Ask one thing about your own. Am I acting correctly right now? Am I aligned with what I control? That question dissolves comparison. You do not debate envy. You remove its reference. Another person's success requires no response, no adjustment, no explanation. It is information, nothing more. When attention remains internal, comparison loses leverage. You continue your work, at your pace, under your conditions. This is not withdrawal, it is precision. You are not denying reality. You are refusing to let outcomes outside your control define your direction. With repetition, this stabilizes. The mind stops reaching outward. Judgment settles inward. You notice the effect. Focus strengthens. Patience returns. Discipline steadies. You are no longer reacting to advantage. You are executing alignment. This is how envy weakens in practice, not through denial, through irrelevance. In the final phase, we will integrate this metric into identity and close the loop between comparison, envy, and sustained self-command. At this stage, the internal metric must become identity, not something you apply occasionally, something you operate from. You are no longer someone who compares. You are someone who evaluates alignment. Others may advance. They may receive recognition. They may appear ahead. None of this alters your position, because your position is not relative. Judgment now answers one authority, your standard. This changes how success around you feels. It no longer threatens. It no longer accelerates you. It no longer diminishes you, because it is not measuring you. You are not denying reality. You are placing it correctly. When comparison is removed, envy has no structure to inhabit. Attention returns inward. Energy returns to execution. Discipline steadies. If this reframe corrected how you respond to others' success, mark that awareness. If this line of training strengthens your judgment, continue with it. In the next video, we will train the mind to want less and show why reducing desire is the fastest way to stabilize control.